Saudi Arabia is moving away from the dollar. Their great escape has officially begun. Now, we've probably heard of this 1,000 times that the Saudis are breaking away from America, but things are moving really fast. The kingdom has joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or the SEO, and that is a China-led economic and security bloc. They are now a dialogue partner, which is the first step towards full membership. And this is a shift that Riyadh is making. They are shifting towards the east. And the Saudi knows that trading with the West is a dangerous affair and their economic future lies in Asia. It lies with Russia, it lies with China and India. And the signs were all building up to this, and the world shouldn't be shocked. You had President Xi traveling to Saudi Arabia in December, and unlike Biden, he didn't get a fist bump but a royal welcome from MBS himself. Then we had China brokering a peace deal between the kingdom and Iran. Two historical rivals are now resuming diplomatic talks with each other. Plus, Russia is also paving the way to restore ties between the Saudis and the Syrians. The agenda is obvious. Let's help the Middle East move towards lasting peace and let them focus more on their economy. And we are seeing a strategy by the Chinese, by the Russians to shift the global order eastwards. And the best way to do this is to win over the Saudis and OPEC. If you can get the biggest oil producers in an economic bloc, that is enough to challenge Western hegemony. An oil alliance between Russia, China, and Saudi Arabia would control nearly 30% of global production, and that is more than American and Canadian production combined. But why is Saudi Arabia breaking away from the United States? America is still the kingdom's main security partner, and just in 2022 alone, Biden approved over $3 billion worth of arms sales to the Saudis. However, even that is slipping. There are now calls from Congress to halt US weapons support to the kingdom based on human rights concerns, with a senator saying US weapons don't belong in the hands of human rights abusers, and they are proposing a resolution that could cut off security assistance to the kingdom. Congress could end their arms sales, so the other shoe could be dropping very soon, and that is why Saudi Arabia is moving to the east. But this security issue is just the tip of the iceberg. We need to dig deeper, guys. The real worry Riyadh has revolves around their oil revenues. They need to secure their economic interests. And this brings us to the two biggest threats facing Saudi Arabia's oil. And this goes beyond just sanctioning away US treasuries or dollar-denominated assets. Every country is worried about that for sure, but we are talking about threats unique to Saudi Arabia. And the first is the price caps on oil. Now, if the G7, they can impose the price caps on Russian oil, it can also happen to Saudi Arabia. And the reasoning will be different for sure, but the effects will still be the same. What if the world's richest countries, the G7, comes together and says, we won't buy your oil unless it is at a price that we like? And if the Saudis aren't diversified away from customers in the West, they will be in big trouble. And we can see that back in 2020, Saudi Arabia still supplies a lot of oil to the Western world and the G7. 15% to Japan, 10% to Europe, and around 7% to the United States. That's almost a third of the oil supply that can be subjected to sanctions and price caps. Even though Saudi Arabia supplies a ton of oil to India and China, it still isn't nearly enough. Their revenues could take a bigger hit, and that's why they are moving eastwards. They want to reduce their dependence on G7 money. But it gets worse. The US Congress has also reintroduced the infamous NOPEC bill back into the spotlight. Now, if passed, this could allow America to take action on OPEC's oil companies on the basis of being a monopoly. It revokes the sovereign immunity that has protected OPEC Plus members, and that is disastrous. Saudi Arabia, of course, is having none of this. They have slammed the NOPEC bill and have told the world that they aren't selling oil to any countries that imposes price caps, which kind of sounds very similar to Russia's position. And I hope this crystallizes the reasons why Saudi Arabia has almost no choice but to pivot to Asia. There's nothing left in the West except for threats and sanctions to get the price that they want. So what is on offer with the SEO? Why is Saudi Arabia choosing to join the bloc? And this is where we have to break down what the SEO is all about. Now, if we look at the member states, and especially on the world map, we can see it essentially includes the entire of Asia except the Southeast. We have Russia, China, India, and Uzbekistan in the group, and even Iran is also joining the SEO very soon. And that's why brokering peace between the Saudis and the Iranians was so important. And if we look at the other dialogue partners, there are even more countries in the Middle East, including Qatar and Turkey. The majority of the SEO are developing countries that need oil to power their economies. And to Saudi Arabia, that is like hitting the jackpot, finding a treasure trove of customers outside of the West, and more importantly, that aren't allies of the United States. Now, MBS, he has a plan for Saudi Arabia, and it is captured in his Vision 2030 agenda. It is all about diversifying their economy away from oil and integrating themselves with the rest of the world. And this is where the SEO comes in. The group accounts for 40% of the world's population and over 30% of global GDP outside of the West, plus the Belt Road Initiative, the BRI, actually runs through the heart of the SEO, connecting Asia, the Middle East, and Europe together. And we're talking about 149 countries with trade totaling over $1.7 trillion done just with China alone. And this fits perfectly into MBS vision to connect Saudi Arabia with the rest of the world. So can you just imagine the possibilities the Saudis have? And I want us to recall the bombshell the Saudi Finance Minister Mohammed Al Jadaan dropped at the Davos conference. He told the world that Saudi Arabia is open to settling their trade in other currencies outside of the US dollar. There are no issues with discussing how we settle our trade arrangements, whether it is in the US dollar, whether it is in the euro, whether it is in the Saudi riyal. Now, even if the kingdom decides not to use the yuan, they can always price their oil in their own currency, the riyal, and that is also de-dollarization. Now, de-dollarization doesn't mean only using the Chinese yuan, it just means not using the US dollar. And that's one fundamental reason why economic alliance with Asia will be successful. It is because unlike the United States, they don't mix foreign policy with business. Asia isn't interested in interfering with another country's local politics. But a big shout out to our sponsor today, Private Internet Access. We all know the importance of keeping some money outside of the banking system, especially in gold. We want privacy for our wealth, and you should be treating your data the same way. Now, using the internet without PIA is like holding your wallet in your back pocket. All it takes is one fast tip to kiss all your money goodbye. Now, online browsing isn't as safe as it used to be. You don't want your identity stolen and any of your financial accounts compromised. And this is why having a VPN is just so useful. It hides your IP address and encrypts your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. And that keeps your data activity confidential away from the hackers. Now, PIA is completely easy to use. You can download the app to your phone or to your desktop and get started. In fact, you can use it to protect all your devices. There's no limit to the number of devices you can use it on. And it works for all platforms including Windows, macOS, and Android. Now, PIA servers covers over 83 countries, including each and every US state. And if I am accessing my trading accounts, I want to make sure my details are completely private. Now, best of all, PIA is risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and 24/7 customer support is there to help you. You can get started with private internet access today and get an 83% discount using the link in the description below. Plus, you'll also enjoy 4 months for free just for being an awesome subscriber to the channel. So check them out and get protected today. And now for the big bombshell, and this changes everything. Saudi Aramco just announced a deal building not just one but 2 refineries in China. And this is a big game changer, and we need to understand why. We know Saudi Arabia has pledged to support China's energy needs for the next 50 years, but they have stepped up their game, they've taken it to the next level, they have thrown in their chips with China. And these aren't small teapot refineries, guys. These are mega investments that can refine up to 700,000 barrels of oil a day. Let me repeat this. China is getting 2 new refineries plus an additional supply of 700,000 barrels of crude oil from Saudi Arabia. That is more oil secured for China and more cash secured for the Saudis. Essentially, the Saudis are starting to refine oil in China, using the country as a base to export to the rest of Asia and the world. And this just strengthens China's economic position because now they have all the energy that they need. They can keep cheap oil from Russia. Saudi Arabia is already their top supplier of crude oil, and now China has the additional refining capacity, courtesy of the Saudis. But here's the kicker. There's a very good chance that once the refinery comes online, China is going to pay for the oil supply in yuan. They're going to use the Chinese yuan or at least the Saudi riyal for the energy deal. And this isn't far-fetched. It is not a fantasy because China just completed the first LNG trade in yuan. But this is the best part. They didn't buy the LNG cargo from the Middle East or even Russia. It didn't come from MBS or Putin. They bought 65,000 tons of LNG from the French company Total Energies. France, a G7 and NATO member, just priced their LNG in a Chinese yuan and sold it to China, not in euros, not in dollars, but settled in yuan. And we are literally witnessing the rise of the petro yuan and the US dollar getting sidelined by one of their own allies. So it is not a stretch to project out into the future that the Saudis will also eventually price their oil in yuan as well. And as long as Biden keeps hammering away on Saudi Arabia, this oil for yuan is virtually inevitable. It's just a matter of time. US influence in the Middle East is slipping away fast, especially when it comes to trade and energy. We can see US oil imports from OPEC and the Persian Gulf dropping to an all-time low, importing only 1.6 million barrels in 2021. And just last year, China alone imported over 1.7 million barrels from Saudi Arabia, more than the United States. But that's not all. China is Saudi Arabia's biggest trading partner, hitting $87 billion in 2022. That's over 3 times more than the US. So we can expect the petro yuan to continue gaining prominence while the petrodollar is now officially under threat. But can it get worse for the dollar? Yes, it can, because the dollarization is going global. Just recently, Brazil and China announced a shocking deal that should make Biden fall off his chair. They are ditching the US dollar and trading in their own local currencies, the Chinese yuan and the Brazilian real. They are going to sidestep the dollar and just do more bilateral trade. We are seeing a global rebellion against the reserve currency in real time. It's bombshell after bombshell, and this isn't going to stop. According to Brazil, this deal will reduce costs to promote even greater bilateral trade and facilitate investment. Business between China and Brazil is also very significant. China is Brazil's biggest trading partner, with trade hitting $150 billion in 2022, and that is a lot of money that will shift away from the greenback towards the Chinese yuan, towards the Brazilian real. But if you combine this with another deal, you'll realize how dangerous this move is for the petrodollar's future. Brazil doesn't just export corn, soybeans, or meat to China. They are one of the top 10 oil producers in the world, accounting for 3% of the world's oil production, just below Iran. Here's the kicker. China also teamed up with Brazil in a $2 billion deal to share production in an oil field just off the Brazilian coast. And if you merge this deal with the bilateral trade bombshell, China could be buying oil from Brazil using the Chinese yuan very soon. In fact, they might already be doing it just under the radar. And this is obviously bad news for the petrodollar, and the petro yuan is becoming more of a reality with each passing day. But notice something interesting. Brazil and China are both part of BRICS, so we can expect more bilateral trade outside of the dollar throughout the BRICS nations very soon. And once Saudi Arabia joins the club, it'll be game over. But why is this happening? Why is the dollar losing its reserve status? And weirdly enough, Elon Musk hits the nail on the head, saying US policy has been too heavy-handed, making countries want to ditch the dollar. But that's not all. He goes on to highlight an even bigger issue, combined with excess government spending, which forces other countries to absorb a significant part of our inflation. So unless the United States stops with their sanctions and the Federal Reserve stops printing money every time there's a crisis, things aren't looking good for the dollar's future. The dollarization at this point is virtually unstoppable. Now, the breaking of the petrodollar system is important. There are two pillars that are still propping up the dollar as the supreme currency. And the first is the petrodollar, which we know is under attack. And the second shoe to drop will be the euro-dollar system cracking. Now, there's a lot of talk about how the US dollar can't be dethroned because the whole world transacts too much in the reserve currency. Now, the majority of the debt is still denominated in dollars, that's true. In fact, over 60% of foreign debt is issued in US dollars. Plus, many people around the world still use dollars when it comes to saving money or investing in the capital markets. But we need to come back to the basic fundamentals of money. When we boil it down, money has only two functions in this modern world that we really care about: a store of value and a medium of exchange. Now, obviously, currencies are not good long-term stores of value. We can all agree on that. They are now colorful pieces of paper used to exchange for goods and services. You hold currencies because you want to access a basket of goods and commodities. And if the petrodollar system breaks, the dollar will be less useful. There will be less demand for it. You don't need it to exchange for the world's most important commodity, which is oil. And this will deal a big blow to the euro-dollar system as well, because they are all interconnected. Now, when will the other shoe drop? And the key sign to look out for is if there's less debt around the world being issued in dollars. And that will happen fast if the United States decides to default on their debt by either not paying or inflating it away by printing money. So hang on tight because this de-dollarization spree is getting from bad to worse. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Will the petrodollar survive? Will Saudi Arabia price their oil in yuan? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.